Hello and welcome to episode 116 of the world's first Paul Weller fan podcast. I'm Dan Jennings, and 10 years ago I gave up my live streaming career as a radio presenter with one big regret: never getting to interview my hero, the legendary British musician Paul Weller. This podcast exists purely to solve that issue. Welcome to Desperately Seeking Paul. In this episode, I am joined by the hugely successful songwriter and musician Paul Barry. A three-time Ivor Novello Award winner, Paul formed his first band, The Questions, whilst at high school in Edinburgh in the summer of '77. A few years later, the band was supporting The Jam, signing to Paul Weller's Respond record label. We'll hear stories of that, the Style Council, Tracie Young, and much more. Plus, how over the past 30-plus years as a songwriter, Paul has had huge success, smash hit singles for the likes of Cher, Enrique Iglesias, James Bay. He's also written for and with the likes of Celine Dion, Tina Turner, Rod Stewart, Lionel Richie, Misha Paris, Ricky Martin, and James Morrison. And listen out for an exclusive reveal of a Paul Weller link in our chat on that as well. Some great stories, writing hugely successful, massive selling smash hit songs for some of the world's biggest pop stars. Let's get into it. Paul Barry, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Dan.
How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good, yeah. I'm keeping busy, writing a lot. It's been mostly on Zoom the past couple of years with the pandemic thing. You know, I found a new way of working like everyone did. I actually started during the pandemic doing some of my own stuff again, which I hadn't done for many years. You know, I've basically been a songwriter for the past, is it 30 years or something? You know, really kind of writing for other people rather than where I started with The Questions. You know, so that's been fun. I think everyone kind of had a pandemic record in them, you know, kind of thing. So one song I wrote, seeing the George Floyd video, which, you know, had an effect on most people. I wrote a song immediately. I saw it and recorded it the next day. And a friend of mine did a little video to it. And I phoned up Paul and asked him if he would, post it on his social media thing, you know, and he did, bless him. And so did James Bay, who I've worked with over the years. So there was that little thing. So that's it. So it is on Spotify. It's the one and only song I've got on Spotify, but it's probably had 50 plays or something.
Well, there'll be more after this conversation. I promise you that much. Hey, look, let's go back to the beginning, because you were such a young kid when The Questions started. You were still at school, weren't you?
Yeah. I mean, it started really age 12 with myself and Stephen Lennon. We were both just mad Beatles fans. He was Lennon and I was Mick Barry, you know. We just, in his bedroom when the Beatles complete, just going through these amazing songs. Oh my God, where'd you play that? Oh, you know, doing that. And I had a garage in my house, outside of my house, and John Robinson was at our school. And so about a year after Stephen and I started, we met with John and we formed a band, The Questions, and we rehearsed in my little garage. And that's how it all started, really. Proper garage band. But we were still at school. We sent a tape to Bruce Findlay, who at that time had Zoom Records. He was just starting Zoom Records, which was a cool little indie label in Edinburgh. And that, you know, we ended up getting it on the telly at age 15, 16, you know. It was great fun. It was a great time as well. It just seemed like everything was possible. This is like 1977 or something, you know, 78. Magical time, it really was. And of course, the Jam were everything. I mean, I grew up on the Beatles and Stevie Wonder, but then hearing, particularly for me, in Tube Station was like, just what an amazing song that was. And then, so we were managed for a while by Bruce Findlay, and bless him, he was great, Bruce, lovely man. And of course, he went on to have massive success with Simple Minds as he managed them, you know. A classic moment, we were about 17, 18, and he'd done a few things with us and we'd got a little bit of traction. But I'll never forget, he sat us down and said, look, guys, I'm going to have to tell you, I've got this other band and I really need to concentrate on them, and I don't think I can give you the time you deserve. You know, this other band with Simple Minds. You know what, even at that age, I thought, that's really cool. The way he did it was very cool. And I spoke to him only a couple of weeks ago about it. You know, I said, just want to say, man, that was kind of cool. And he's brilliant. He was really
I love that. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it wasn't a bad decision that he made there, right?
And he said, it was great that you then went on to meet Weller, you know, and that was, so just trying to get the timeline. So I think John Robinson sent the tape, first of all. We getting some songs together, and he sent the tape to Paul. And as Paul does, he replied, not many people even would do that. But not only did he reply, he said he loved the songs, and he even went through some of them and made some suggestions and stuff, which always something about Weller. He's just one of those rare people that you should listen to what he says, because most of the suggestions he makes have got some merit to them. And we didn't always listen, but it was great to get that response. And then the next thing he said, we're playing Edinburgh. Do you want to support us? I'm like, yeah.
Let me think about that for all of a second.
And meeting him was amazing. I've never met anyone so unaffected as well. I'm sure people have told you that, right? And he's the same now as he was then. That's the funny thing. So I met him, I don't know, must have been 18 or something. I'm still in touch with him now. I was working with him 2-3 years back, and I speak to him every now and then. He sends me songs sometimes on the new records and says, "What do you think?" He's still exactly the same Paul Weller that he was then. Come and listen to this, or with fans who the whole soundcheck thing, getting it. Sometimes the soundchecks were more like gigs, they were so packed. It was great. I've never seen a band doing that, and I don't think anyone's done it since. It was very genuine. It's always been like that.
The connection with fans was so important for the Jam, and that, like you say, those sound checks and things. So, but for a young band to get that gig supporting them,
it was brilliant.
Wow.
It was amazing. We it wasn't all good though, I have to say, because we would sometimes it was good, but I mean we got a lot of coins and shoes and coats and spit, and we had to get pretty good at dodging around the stage,
You were pretty nimble.
Yeah, we had to be nimble. I remember our drummer Frank used to tilt his cymbals up sometimes so he wouldn't get hit by the coins. Our roadie Derek would collect the coins at the end of some of the gigs and it'd be like, "Oh, great, that's the drink sorted out for tonight."
I can now play cards with John Weller. Brilliant.
Oh yeah. No, you didn't want to do that. But we really did struggle sometimes because we were doing quite sort of white boy soul, like blue-eyed soul, whatever we were doing that. And that didn't go down well with everyone. I think we eventually won over a certain audience, but for a while it was a bit hairy. There was one gig in particular in Leeds where
your face as you remember this is brilliant.
7,000 people vibrating with hate is something I'd never experienced before in one place, because the PA broke down. John, in his wisdom, said, "Are you waiting for someone?" Yeah, well, you can effing wait. The police wanted to arrest us backstage for inciting a riot. I'm glad to say things improved. We actually had some amazing gigs supporting the Jam and the Style Council later, and on our own. The 100 Club was a great gig. We did that many times and some amazing nights there. Yeah.
Paul as a musician is obviously very prolific. The amount of material we've had over the past 40, 45 years is incredible. But talking to people on this podcast, he's quite a prolific writer as well. So the fact that he's like handwriting letters back to fans, you sent like a demo, or John sent a demo over, and his handwriting back is remarkable, isn't it? Like, this is a guy who's topping the charts.
And even now, Dan, it's still like I sent him during the lockdown thing, I was writing these things. I was writing a few songs and I just sent him things and I thought he probably won't reply, or maybe in a month he'll say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't get that." Usually straight away, or if it's not straight away, he'll say, "Oh, I was busy" or something, and he'll give a full reply and he'll go into, not only that, he'll make a bunch of suggestions about, "I like that bit, I like that, is that right?" And it's thinking, you're Paul Weller, how do you have the time to do that? It's so cool.
And he's got young kids. I mean, I don't understand. I've got no time whatsoever.
He's got, how many has he got now? Is it 7?
I think 8, yeah. Now, look, let's talk through this story then of signing to Respond. What was the brief? Because you weren't just signed as the questions, you were also writing for other people. So Paul recognised your songwriting qualities as much as the band's qualities.
Well, interesting you should say that. Yes, he did. We were kind of a bit blinded into just wanting to do our own thing. And Paul kept saying, you should be writing for different acts, doing different stuff. He even introduced us to Bananarama before they had any releases. He said, "You should write songs for them." And I was like, "Nah, why do I want to do that?" So again, he said a lot of things like that I wish I'd listened to. Funnily enough, I ended up writing with them many years later in the 90s, mid-90s. I did an album with them, which was, as they say, big in Japan, which means it wasn't but it was funny, and I joked about it then when I met them. I said, Paul said I should work with you guys way back then, and I wish I had done. So yeah, he did encourage that very much, and I wish we'd done a bit more of it. Obviously, Tracie stuff and that. He was very into the whole eclectic thing about people working in different genres and working with different people, and as he still is. The body of work he's done, it's incredible, and the amount of people who's just been around and that gravitate towards him, it's amazing. And I know why, because of his energy and his enthusiasm, and his talent. But it's also, it's more than just talent, what I'm saying.
So there was this run of singles from 82. So this is towards the end of the Jam, Respond Records. Paul set this up, this label, and he talks about it kind of being his version of Motown, where there's this kind of these artists and house bands and everybody kind of, working together and it feeling like a family. But there's this run of singles where, people love these singles. I mentioned on social media that we were chatting, and the amount of people are like, oh my God, Work and Play is incredible, or Tear Soup is, oh my God, or The Price You Pay. People love these singles, but they didn't break the top 40, did they? Which is nuts.
It was very hard in those days. I think Tuesday Sunshine got the closest, 45, 46. And I think it sold like 40,000 records to do that.
Which is still a massive, massive amount. People would kill for that these days.
And that would be like number one for 10 weeks now. Insane, isn't it? That was frustrating. So the house that Jack built was the only one that broke the top 10, Was that seen as disappointing? Because you say like 40,000 records is a huge amount, but was that seen as disappointing and like... Yeah, it was. Yeah, because and also you don't get on top of the pops until you break top 40, although we went on with Tracie on top of the pops, we didn't do it in our own right. And so it was frustrating that, I think Tuesday Sunshine was the closest we got. It got a bit of airplay, but it just didn't connect. My feeling, Dan, was that I don't think we ever really captured in the studio the energy that we had. We always struggled with that, I think, capturing in the recording the way we were live, what we could do, what we could generate. That was frustrating. But I do like, it's funny you mentioned those ones. I'd like Work and Play. I thought that was good. And Price You Pay and Tuesday Sunshine. A lot of the others I found just, we didn't quite capture the sound in the recording. That was a bit frustrating.
I should ask you about some of the credits on some of the singles as well. So Spanner has been on the podcast. So Spanner's mentioned on, I think it's Price You Pay, thanks to Spanner. Yeah. So he was plugging the singles, was he, as well?
Yeah, he was, yeah. It was very much, like you say, a family thing. Probably, and I think Simon Halfon was doing some of the artwork. Yeah, it was all very much the Motown idea of a team effort. Yeah.
We've also got Kenny, You Scottish Bastards, Wheeler.
Kenny Wheeler. Have you done an interview with Kenny?
I have. I was lucky enough to go to Kenny's house and chat with him, and what a character, brilliant, yeah.
He's fine, man.
What was it like with Kenny back in the day? Because his remit then was a bit different, right?
Yeah, he's working in a slightly different capacity then. Then it was, he was just larger than life, as he always has been. And, he didn't take no shit. Also, just always raised the sort of mood of the room, Kenny was always a bright spot.
And obviously Paul's involved in managing you, but I'm guessing John Weller did quite a lot of that stuff as well, right?
Yeah, a fair amount. I think we sort of lost our way a little bit when we started doing the album. Looking back, we probably should have looked at different producers at that time to try and work out that problem. We did actually try a couple of people, but it didn't really work out. I think although we were still gigging a lot, I think we never quite got the studio thing right at the end there. And that's ultimately, I think, what led us to, or for me anyway, feeling that it'd run its path,
That album, Belief, in 1984. So at this time, you're also working as part of the Style Council gigs, and there's the Respond Posse gigs and all that stuff. So let's talk about the Style Council, because it was really interesting rewatching the documentary the other day as part of the exhibition. And that reminder that the Style Council, in those early council meetings gigs, Style Council come on first, then you got Billy Bragg, then you, then Billy Bragg, then the Style Council, and they were really shaking up a bit. How did the audiences take to that?
Those gigs were mostly pretty good, actually. Really good. By that time, I think the haters would probably go to the bar.
I guess there's also less of them because you were closer to sound to the Style Council than you were to the Jam, right?
Yeah, that's true. That happened. So there was less of that, who are these soul boys kind of thing, And also they'd heard a bit of our music by then. But it was an amazing thing doing that, to be in the middle of a show like that. Was brilliant and so cool. And Billy Bragg was amazing too. It was great fun doing that tour with him. We played everywhere in the UK. On our own as well, we did a lot of gigs up and down. And then we also did like a Respond Posse tour with Tracie as well, and Vaughan Toulouse and A Gay Craze. There were those tours as well.
There's this album I've got here. Let me show you this. So this is almost like the Respond version of Motown Chartbusters, right? Where you had all these different tracks from different, from Tracie and A Craze that you mentioned, and you're on their Work and Play and building on a strong foundations on there. But I want to read you, because one of the things I loved about the Style Council is that whole kind of Cappuccino Kid thing. And that's the kind of notes from Paul on these albums and singles and all that kind of stuff was brilliant for Style Council and a lot of the response stuff. So here we go. This is what it says about the questions. Let's see if you remember any of this. So, hailing from Edinburgh, it has taken John, Frank and Paul 2 years to reach where they now find themselves, with a direction, with faith and with confidence. And now the ability. They don't have to rely on other people's perspectives of hipness. They have their own, in the shape and context of classic songs. If Tracie embodies Response vitality, then the questions represents its quality. They have a word for cats like these. It's potential. Let it breathe and grow as potential must. And I just reread that this morning. I thought, that is class, man.
It is class. And that is Weller, let potential grow and breathe as it must. And he carries that through in everything he does. It's brilliant. It's not like he's got a Midas touch. It's just that he understands how potential must get that chance to breathe and grow. And someone like him can be so inspiring. When someone like him says, that's great that you did that there, that even now when the songs I sent him recently, and he sent me back a little text and that and thumbs up, and I wanted to make it into a T-shirt. Oh, well, I said this, I still get a kick out of that. I don't think of him as Paul Weller pop star. He's just a cool guy, but I still feel like a 17-year-old kid again. Takes me right back to that time of him reacting to what we were doing then and believing in it. That was just an incredible thing,
Yeah, we mentioned the album Belief, and I should mention also Steve White played a bit on it, Barbara Snow, obviously both, honorary councillors and then band members of the Style Council as well. Maureen Barry.
Yeah.
Relation, obviously, right?
Yeah, sister, yeah.
Sister. Credited with body popping on the album.
She was great. She's, again, live, Maureen had a lot singing and just her vitality, Yeah, she had a great time. I mean, she's not continued in music. She's gone on and had kids and living in America now.
Can she still break dance? Do we know?
I think she's got a dodgy ankle, but I'm sure
she'll give it a go, right?
She still break dances.
Now, we talk about potential. I mean, Mr. Weller must have seen something in you to encourage the songwriting and stuff, because you've been pretty successful at this, right?
I've done all right.
You've done all right. Let's talk through some of the artists. I mean, you mentioned Bananarama. There's Alison Limerick. There's another Jam Weller connection there, I think, as well. But the big one for me, this takes me right back to the beginning of my radio career, right? I was BBC Radio Bristol. John Turner used to do the mid-morning show, right? It was a huge, big show in Bristol. And he'd open his show around this time, it's in the 90s, he'd open his show with this album, songs from this album every day that I'm going to mention. We loved this LP. It was huge. Cher, Believe. And he'd play One Day We Believe, then it'd be Strong Enough. I mean, the fact that you wrote those songs is enough for anybody. Just one career, that would be done. Just those and is enough. I mean, God, you must be so proud of those.
That was so much fun. I mean, for about 5 years before that, I had been sort of focusing on writing, because up until that point, I wanted to be an artist, and I did have a band. After the questions, I had one band with a guy called Steve Torch, who co-wrote Believe with me. We did a record called All Things Bright and Beautiful. The name of the band was God's Gift. I think we made a great record, which was released in Europe. It wasn't released in the UK, and I was really proud of that, but it didn't really do anything. And I think at that point, I should mention, and the guy who got me in touch with Steve Torch was a guy called Brian Rowland, kind of managed us at that point, the band. And then he encouraged me to focus on writing as well. And I think the disappointment of that record, that band not taking off really, and then me doing some writing. And I actually worked with Peter Waterman for a while. That's how I did the Bananarama and a few other mainly dance stuff, you know. But it was
was that like Gina G and all that? Was that time? Was that?
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Brian Rolling then saying, "Look, you should focus on writing." It was like a turning a key, and suddenly I let go of the artist thing. I just thought, you know what, just let go of that. It's so hard doing the artist thing because you have to be so many things. Just being a writer is a lot less stressful. And it's a lot more fun. And, you know, all of a sudden I was doing these different things. I'd be doing a dance record, then I'd be doing a country song or, you know, a more sort of singer-songwriter thing the next week. And I loved that. All of a sudden I really had fun again in music, you know, and I was doing different bits and pieces. And I'd written a song for a boy band in Italy. And I'd written this song, Dove l'amore. You know, Cher got to hear it. It's just one of those crazy things, you know. Somebody in our guy played it. It's just, I love that. Oh, I'll do that. We have a production team with Brian Rolling and Mark Taylor and myself. Brian was the guy that puts it all together. Mark was the producer, and at that point I was the writer there. She heard that and said, I want to do that. She came over to do one song. It was just one of those magical things. She really clicked and really enjoyed working with us. Instead of saying 2 days, she stayed 6 weeks. At the end of that time, I had 5 songs on the album, and the last one was Believe.
And it was a massive hit all over the world.
It was insane. It was completely insane, you know. And at the time, I remember thinking, I just hope it's a top 20 record. You would hope we don't put some sort of nail in the coffin of Cher's career, you know.
It had been a few years since she'd been around with like chart success, hadn't it? Like 5 years, 6 years?
She'd had one album with Warner's, and there was one song on it written by a guy from Liverpool. It was called One on One or One by One. I think One by One it was called. And that was quite a good song, but the rest of the album was, yeah. And Warner's had done a 2-album deal, so this was the second album, and they weren't really that bothered. So they handed her to a couple of DJs, and she hated the experience. She hated it so much, she was almost in tears. So when she came to our place just to do that one song, and she met us and she saw the way we worked, and we were all about songs and just chatting to her. And we had this little studio, and she sat on this little sofa about the size of this tiny little sofa with me and Mark. We just got on, and she actually said, let's do some more, you know, and I wrote Strong Enough, like while she was there pretty much. Because, you know, I was trying to do I Will Survive. She said she wanted to do something like that. So we got that together. And I remember the first day, like the end of the first day, she did something I've never seen her do since. She got a bottle of wine and had a couple of glasses of wine. And she was in tears. I said, what's up? She felt good again. She said, this is great. I love this. And it's been so horrible. It's hard to think of Cher going into a situation, working with other people and not enjoying it, you know. I won't say who they were.
But also the fact that she still cares enough, like that much. She still wants to create something that means something to people. And
she still does. I'm in the process of doing something just now, which hopefully will pan out with her. But she still cares that much. You know, she's still very self-critical. You know, strange mixture of diva and quite insecure in a charming way. But she's got a great sense of humour as well. She was sitting there, and she just turns around at me and goes, so what the F have you done then to be doing the Cher record? Okay.
I went with Weller. What's the matter with you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So when you write a song like, I mean, Believe obviously is a full production. It's not just the lyrics, although they are fabulous, but there's all the effects on the voice. So when you write that song, are you thinking about that?
That vocal effect was Mark Taylor, the producer. Right. We were in the same building. I had a little room upstairs, writing room, and he had a studio in the basement, and he ran upstairs and he said, I've done something, this effect, and it's either brilliant or awful. And so we both ran downstairs, and he had it over the whole song, and I said, it's amazing, it's brilliant, but we can't have it on the whole song. So we picked out the lines that we thought he worked on, and we said, well, we'll play it tomorrow, so she might hate it. She comes in and goes, I love it, erase the original vocal. But cut to 3 weeks later, there's a meeting with the record company, the chairman of the record company, and he says, okay, we're going to go with Believe for the first single, but you're not having that effect on it. That's awful. Not on my record. And we're like, oh, no. Cher goes, over my dead effing body. That's and that was it. I was doing a covers band thing at the time, and I used to take up records of things I was working on every now and give them to the DJ. And I remember I said, put this on, and straight away people hadn't heard it yet, but they listened to it and they started doing robot dancing on the dance floor like that. They got it. It was a thing, you could say, oh, I think this is going to be a hit.
Yeah, a bit of an understatement, but yeah. Some of the stars that you've worked with as well as Cher, I mean, I have to name these people, right? So we've got Rod Stewart, James Morrison, who funnily enough did some stuff with Weller recently, and I know Paul was a big fan of James Morrison. Lionel Richie, Tina Turner, Enrique Iglesias is another one we should come back to as well, because those were smash hits, massive songs all around the world. What is it about these type of artists, and I'll include Paul in this as well, that makes their songs and makes their music and the way they deliver their music? Because obviously it's as much down to the quality of the writing as it is their performance too. But yeah, how does it connect? And some people just don't.
I think it's that instant recognition. Instantly it's the voice, for me anyway. Some people just have that, and they might not be great singers technically, but straight away, like Tina Turner, straight away that's Tina Turner. And Cher too. Actually, I hadn't thought about Cher in that way until the day that I worked with her in the studio. And, I was going through the song with her and just playing it, and she sang, and it's like, oh my God, that's Cher. There's no one else in the world that sounds like that, And the same with Tina Turner. I had an amazing, amazing day with Tina Turner just playing her song. And I had this thing, I was playing her a song. She didn't know it yet. So I just played it on the guitar a wee bit, and I'm sat there on the sofa with her, and she's reading the lyrics. Yeah, and she's doing it. She starts singing. She gets up doing the Tina thing. And her glasses break in the middle of it, right? I don't know why. They just break. Most people would stop and say, oh, sorry, I'll just take my glasses. No. Tina Turner, she keeps singing the song, man. Standing up, dancing, singing it. Fucking the glasses, I'm thinking, oh my God, chills, real chills. Yeah.
That is incredible. We have to also talk Enrique Iglesias as well. Again, winning you Ivor Novello Awards, these huge, big international smash hit singles. Hero, Be With You, these songs that dominated our charts, but right around the world. How did that connection come about?
Well, again, a bit like the Cher thing, I'd written a song called Bailamos for a girl singer in South America. Now, the thing is, this is in 99, I think, 1999, 98. In those days, you could release a song with someone somewhere else in South America and no one would know about it. You wouldn't get away with that nowadays because it's so easy to just, hang on, someone sends you a demo and you just, Bailamos, does that mean? And then you can, in 10 minutes, you've checked out if it's been released.
Yes. Yeah.
But in those days, you could you could release a song like that and then no one would ever know about it. So we got a call from someone we knew saying that Julio's son is looking for a song, and I was a bit, Julio's son, really? But, well, I've got this song, Bailamos, I'd written it, and probably one of the fastest songs I've ever written. It's a friend of mine who spoke Spanish. I remember I phoned her up and said, what's Let's Dance in Spanish? And Bailamos. And I got the pronunciation wrong. It's actually Bailamos. But as Bailamos, I put it on the O, which Enrique years later said, you did that. Everyone say, did you do that deliberately? Because that's what people keep saying to me. It's Glaswegian, Anyway, I wrote it, we demoed it, and this girl did it in South America. That was the end of it. And then the phone call comes through, Julio's son's looking for something, and he's never done anything in English. And it was just perfect because it had this couple of phrases in Spanish, but the rest of the song was English. And he loved it, did it, bang, number one in America. Huge. And then I did another couple of songs for him, which were hits in America. And then we started writing together. We did Be With You, which is another number one. And then we did Hero, which was number one in the UK as well.
I remember when I used to do breakfast shows on radio, and I remember we played that song every day. It was massive.
Hero, yeah. That was actually my attempt at Bruce Springsteen. So then if I was doing a sort of Bruce Springsteen riff, and it just became something else. And I like the idea of it being, instead of him being this Latin lover, of him being someone who actually is being vulnerable and saying, would you dance? Would you laugh? Would you piss your pants? That was kind of the lyric I had going round. I just thought it was a kind of funny thing, I knew we couldn't use piss your pants, but that, and he liked that. He liked the flipping it, thing, and it kind of worked. But I didn't think for 1 minute it was even going to be a single. That's the way those things are. I never know. I'm not one of those people who say, "Oh, I know that's a hit." I really don't. I just know what I like.
So how do you keep it fresh? And I would ask this question of Paul if and when we get to chat as well, because there's so many songs here we're talking about. You obviously find new ways of doing things or inspiration from different places. But what's that desire to kind of keep things fresh, keep things new, and where do you get your inspiration from?
I get it from new artists, actually. I don't listen to a lot of music, funnily enough. Every now and then I sort of dive into Spotify and I usually feel depressed. But, so every now and then someone will say, oh, there's this. For instance, like Sam Fender's amazing. That just, to me, Sam Fender was like hearing the Jam again almost. Yeah. Someone was actually writing about his town and his life and growing up in a beautiful way, man. But apart from that, there's not a lot, and I love Ozzy. What excites me is actually meeting new up-and-coming young artists and hearing their stories, and they sort of play me things. And I've got kids now, that have grown up. They play me stuff, and then you should listen to this. Like my daughter was years ago really got into Billie Eilish right at the beginning, and I was like, I didn't get it, but she was, no, listen. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. So I kind of get that from them because I'm quite old school, really. I still love I'll still play Beatles albums all the time and Stevie Wonder albums and things like that. And, I love old songs, really. But it's my kids and the artists that I work with who tend to be a lot younger than me who bring in things and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's what I really like. So what keeps it fresh for me, I love that thing of sitting in a room one-on-one with a new artist, especially a new artist, like someone who's, I obviously loved working with Lionel Richie and people like that as well. That's a different thing. They've got so many amazing stories to tell you, and they've had such amazing life experiences. But the thing that I really like is a new artist, someone up and coming that just gives you their fresh perspective on how they see life. And you hope that you can give them something that they would never have come up with themselves. And when that happens and they then take it somewhere new, that's magic, So I think that keeps it fresh for me. How do I sort of get new ideas? Just picking up the guitar, playing it in a different way, trying different instruments, different sounds, things like that sometimes inspire you. But a lot of the time, it's just things people say. Like my mum used to always come out with little sayings like, son, what was it when she used to say? If the sky wasn't so dark, the stars wouldn't shine so bright, and things like that. And life is only borrowed for a while, little things like that. And I'd use them in songs, didn't tell her, didn't credit her.
She's doing some Rosses, yeah.
No, I did tell her recently, actually. I actually wrote a song for Misha Paris recently called Mama Said. I had that one thing about your darkest hour is only 60 minutes long. So you have something like that. That one phrase will just say what you want the rest of the song to say, and it will just hang around your head for a few days. And go. Lyrics kind of usually start the process because they have a natural rhythm to where the melody should go, So if you've got a phrase like that, it will kind of generate somewhere in your head. I find it's a hard balance between not forcing it, but at the same time forcing yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I tell you what, though, the thing when you say that line there, if I came up with a line like that, I'd be like, for days, I'd just be like, God, I'm brilliant.
Probably someone else came up with it. A lot of the time, things are just out there and you just pick them up. That's the thing. But it's what you do with them. I'm not, precious about titles and things like that. Like Hero, I remember thinking, it is a bit of a cheesy title. That should we call it something else? But then it's what you do with it. And the thing about the Enrique Hero one was it was a flip on the usual thing. It was saying, I'm actually vulnerable. I'm not. It's not the Bonnie Tyler hero. It's the opposite of that.
Is it something that can be taught? Is it something that you can pass on? And do you pass that? Like, can you learn to write songs from a teacher?
I think you can learn a craft. I think I've learned it from working with different people. I don't think you can learn the sort of magic bit. I mean, if you listen to Paul McCartney saying that, he said he still doesn't know what it is, although he'll make suggestions about how to do it and that, but really he still is captivated by the magic of it, and I am too. And I think that if you did sort of figure it out, that you wouldn't do it anymore. What I love is the thing that at the end of the day there can be a song there that wasn't there in the morning, and every time I write with someone, I believe that we can do something that might last forever. And that's an incredible thing. I don't mean it in a big-headed way. I just mean it can happen, right?
Yeah, of course,
And it didn't exist before that day, and you might just make something really, really special. And I think everyone can do it. I think everyone's got a hit in them. It's just whether they can do it again and again.
And whether they'll actually have the courage to put pen to paper or, notes to phone or whatever it is these days. Yeah. Hey, look, we've got some questions from the fans here that I have to ask you as well. Okay, so Jim Gearing on Facebook said, I'm really looking forward to this one, Dan. I love the questions. I saw them play live loads of times. My questions would be to ask him whether he thinks being on Paul's Respond record label hindered the band's chances of success. There seems to be a bit of a music press backlash against Paul after he split the Jam, and the Respond artists seem to take the brunt of it. And I think it affected the band's success.
I don't think so. I think it was a great platform. And I think, like I say, I think the haters went to the bar. I think enough people loved it, and I'm delighted. And Jim, thank you for, if you were there at the gigs, for supporting it. And if you loved it, that's all that matters. And I think enough people did. I don't think it hindered us. I think that Paul Weller gave us a brilliant platform, a brilliant chance. Don't regret it.
He also says, does he have the rights, the tapes, etc., to allow the Questions material, so the singles, the A, the B-sides, plus the Belief album, unreleased gems like Across the Divide, to get an official UK release? Would love to see this.
Yeah, we should do that. I do have the tapes. Yeah, I got them off Paul actually about 6-7 years ago, because they were in a vault and they were going to be chucked out. So I said, no, I'll have them. So I've got them. Yeah, it would be good. I'll need to talk to John about that, John Robinson, and see what we do about that. There have been people in touch saying they wanted to do that and release that, and I haven't done it before, but maybe we should look at that, I suppose. Yeah.
I suppose. Come on. I mean, I know you're busy, Paul. Come on.
No, it's not really that. I think really it's just my disappointment in the Belief album. I think it's that. I think some of the singles are really good, but I've always felt that we never quite captured it in the studio with the album. That's my personal disappointment. But, it's up to the others, other members of the band as well, see what they want to do.
Actually, Nick Butler asked that. He says, are Frank and John still in the music business?
I don't know about Frank, but I heard that John has just done a record of some sort. Now, I don't know the release situation on it, but funny enough, I was speaking to Stephen Lennon, who was in the original lineup way back, and he said he'd spoken to John recently and he had been working on a record. So watch out for that. I don't know any more information.
We'll do some digging. Walcon Jenko on Twitter said, I was introduced to the Questions at the 100 Club and Drill Hall. I loved the energy and music played in the small venues. Not easy so soon after the Jam split, but they were excellent. Their fashion sense was pretty dubious, though.
Right, okay. I might blame Mr. Weller for a bit of that, because he took us to, he said, I'm going to get you guys some clothes, because when we were doing our own thing, we used to we'd either do the tracksuit thing, which was slightly ahead of its time, actually. It was all
about 30 years ahead, right?
Yeah. Or we did the other thing, we sort of, as a kind of Mickey tape, we would wear like bow ties and white shirts like the Michael Jackson kind of. There was a bit of that. I remember us doing a bit of that. But he did say, right, okay, I'm going to take you out and get some clothes, guys. And he took us to Mr. Buy Rights. So I blame Weller for that one.
Could have been CNA, come on. Jonathan Gregory says, I remember seeing the Questions many times, and Paul Barry wrote some great songs. Tuesday Sunshine, Price You Pay, The Learning Tree, Tear Suit, which was a beauty, especially the bass intro. I used to write letters of support and encouragement to Paul, and he kindly wrote back. So this was a kind of learning from Mr. Weller, I'm guessing, right?
Yes, I know that name. I know John, yeah. I haven't spoken to him for a while, but I haven't been in touch for a while. But yes, exactly, learning from Mr. Weller. I wish I was as conscientious as he is. Thank you, John.
He saw you first at the Aston Students' Union in 1984.
Wow. Can't remember that. But I know we played it, but can't remember that actual gig. But wow, 1984. Yeah. Wow.
Here's another one. London Centrical says, I first saw them in St. Austell. You got about in 1982 with Dolly Mixture and the Rim Shots. So these were other really early signings to Respond, right?
Yeah, the Rim Shots. Yeah.
Saw them live many times supporting Weller, Respond packages, loads of their own gigs. Did their connection to Weller first give them a media boost, but ultimately become a negative? So we mentioned that. But he says, obviously, you're a very successful songwriter, and we kind of know what you did yet, but what are the rest of them up to? What of Maureen Barry? So we've talked about that. He mentioned Joseph Jones. Joseph Key, it was Keys, right?
Yeah, he was Frank's brother. I'm afraid I don't know what he's doing. I haven't heard from Joseph. He was doing his own thing, though. He wanted to do his own artist thing. I have no idea what happened there.
We need to bring the band back together, man. This is like, there's a whole documentary in this.
I miss playing live. I really do, yeah.
Because you mentioned that there's that decision of kind of pre-Cher where you're kind of going, okay, well, I'm going to, lose the I want to be a star element, I guess, and move into the writing songs bit. There must be an element. You mentioned like making your own music again now, but there must be an element where that never goes away, right?
It never goes away. And I think what the sort of the fix that I got from it while I was being a songwriter was doing the covers band. And I had a covers band called Fret Monkey, and we played like 70s soul, Sly Stone and Stevie Wonder stuff and Chic, and it was great. It was a funky band. We had some amazing singers. That sort of kept me going, but then it got to a point where I just couldn't let the band down. I was like, we've got a gig. I mean, you've got to be there till 3 a.m, and I've got a session the next day. That's not going to work. So
yeah. I'm with Lionel Richie tomorrow. I can't be up all night.
Literally, it was actually. Yeah, that was a funny story. That one, I remember that one. Yeah, just one of the gigs. Yeah, it was actually funny you should say that, because it was one of the gigs I had to cancel. It was my first time meeting Lionel Richie and working with him. And I had to play him. What I usually do, I usually have 3 bits to play, and I sat down at the piano and I had 3 choruses. And the first one, there was absolute silence. And the sweat is like standing there. The second one, I'm halfway through it, and still nothing. And I get on to the third one, and he taps me on the shoulder and he said, "Sorry, you've got the gig." What I said, the second one was a song called Angel, which he still doesn't. He still doesn't. He's set to this day, but it was terrifying experience.
I love that. Letting you wait. Yeah. Have you written with Paul since? Would you write with Paul? Would you love to write with Paul?
No, I have. Funnily enough, James Morrison. It's about 4 years ago. I called Paul up. Oh, I should say, the studios that we have with the team I work with, our studio is just outside Ripley.
Oh, you're just down the road, right?
The Black Barn is down there, So I'd worked quite a lot with James Morrison at this point. I'd done a couple of albums with him. You Make It Real was probably the biggest song I'd had with him. Yeah, he was doing some new stuff. I thought, what, I wonder if Weller would be up for it. So I called up Paul and he said, yeah. Do you fancy writing something with me for James Morrison? He said, yes, he's a great singer, isn't he? And he came down to our studio, which is called Metrophonic, just outside Ripley. And we had a couple of days. We wrote a couple of songs, and one of them's a real cracker. It's a real cracker. And to this day, every time Weller bumps into James Morrison, he's like, apparently James told me, he says, he's like, "What's happening with that song, James?"
I'll have it back.
Well, no, you're not released it. He's a great singer. You're not released it yet. So it's funny. Here's another thing about Weller that I must say. It's a lovely thing, but it's also completely unique to Paul Weller. He doesn't really live by the rules that the rest of us have to live with, which is you might write something that you think's brilliant, and even the artist might love, but the record company have got to love it. The management's got to love it. The plugger's got to get it. It's all got to. Whereas with Paul Weller, it's like, I believe in it, let's get it out. And he can do that. Nobody else could do that. And in fact, someone who brought it to my attention recently was, I've been working with Paul's daughter, Leah Weller.
Written for the new album that's coming out very soon, right?
I've got a couple of songs on the new album. While we were writing, something came up about that. Oh, yeah, she'd heard this song, this James Morrison song called Broken. And she said, it's great. And she said, my dad doesn't understand why it's not out, why it's not being released. It could be great, And she was laughing. And I was laughing too. She said, yeah, he doesn't understand. It's just like there's a whole line of people who've got to give it the thumbs up. And that's our world. That's the world that we live in. We might love something, but unless X, Y, and Z give it the thumbs up, it ain't coming out, But I'm hopeful that song will come out. Weller's got anything to do with it. He keeps bumping into James Morrison.
Well, next time I'm down that way, because we often take the kids to RHS Wisley, just around the corner from you both, you guys, right? Which is beautiful there. So next time I'm down there, I'll pop in and have a little listen. That'd be lovely.
Yes, I'll play a couple of things. Also, funnily enough, I've been last year I was writing with DC Lee as well.
This is for her new album that's coming out next year, I think, right?
Yeah, I had what it was. This was a different one. It was nothing to do with Paul. It was someone that I knew before who co-manages her now, I think, said, you know, have you got anything for Dee? And I actually had a backing track of something that was quite kind of so jazzy, and I sent her that, and she's written a song over that. I don't know, fingers crossed it will come out, but, you know, I never know. You know, people always say to me, you know, oh, so how do you get paid? Do you get paid then when you sit in a room and work with someone? No. So, oh, do you get paid when it's recorded then? No. So do you get paid when the manager okays it? No. I only get paid when it's released, mate. You know, when it's a hit, that's it. Until that, it's all on spec. People don't understand that. They think, yeah, how do you get paid? You know, it's a weird thing. Yeah.
Even more bloody frustrating that James Morrison's not released that song, right?
Exactly.
Come on, James, take the hint.
Yeah.
Oh, man, this has been so lovely chatting with you, Paul. I really love digging into these memories and your stories. Thank you so much for your time. I have 2 final questions before you go, okay? So you're allowed one Paul Weller song for the rest of your life. It can be the Jam, the Style Council, or solo. What are you going to go with?
Just the one.
Just the one.
Oh.
What's going through your brain? What's popping in right now?
Well, there's two. There are 2 songs, and I'm fighting between. It's Tube Station because of the impact it had on me when I heard it that first time. I'd never heard anything like that. And someone writing about someone being murdered in a tube station and making it a piece of art. It's a classic thing about Weller. He can have one phrase like the distant echo of faraway voices, and straight away you're there. You know, he's very good at setting a scene with minimal language, you know, and it's so powerful. The toffee wrappers and the guy lying there dying, thinking, oh, they've got the keys, she'll think it's me. That song takes you to the darkest place in a beautiful song. You know, how he could do that at age, and he was 19, wasn't he, or something when he wrote it?
Yeah.
I think it would be that one, but the other one is obviously That's Entertainment. I remember hearing that one, and by that time, you know, we knew Paul, and he was playing us things, and I remember hearing that one going, wow, that's stream of consciousness, and he wrote that one really quickly. But I'm going to also say, hang on, there's another one that, because we were there, I was there in the studio when they were recording Town Called Malice.
Ah, take me back to that session, come on.
Yeah, I was there. We were, it was one of our first forays down to London. We'd done some gigs, and John and I were invited up with a bunch of 30 other kids to sit in the room while I remember Bruce was doing the bass line and Paul was making cups of tea and just talking to everyone, and just, it's the town called Malice. And that was a hit. I mean, I know I said I don't know when necessarily when a hit's a hit, but hearing that there, it's like, oh wow, that's just such an amazing song. Oh God, I've said 3, haven't I? They're all
crazy, those stories.
They're all grand songs, but I love some of his new stuff as well. I love Gravity. I love Broken Stones, but it would have to be. I guess it's going to have to be Tube Station, because it was the first time. I mean, I'd heard In the City as well, and I thought that was great. But Tube Station and that whole album, you know, but Tube Station in particular, I think.
When you guys were supporting the Jam from, right, what was it, 1980 onwards, right? You do your set. What would you do after you'd done your set? You'd obviously watch the band, but where would you go?
I would go out front. I mean, sometimes side the stage. I do remember some of that. We liked going out there and, experiencing it. I must have seen them so many times. Amazing gigs. I remember one in Guildford, which is quite near where I live now. This was later on, and I remember that was side stage. And I've got a memory of Scrape Away, that bass line, and the sweat coming down in the hot summer's night, and it was just electric. But so many great gigs. I mean, what a band.
Yeah.
What a band, David.
Well, you wish you could bottle those memories, don't you, and kind of like, or transport back to that. Like, I mean, I know that with Weller Solo right at those beginning. You know, when I discovered Paul, it was Into Tomorrow all that time, and those gigs at that time were just incredible. And you go, God, I wish my memory was better.
Yeah, and we didn't have phones then to video and all that.
Yeah.
But all the more we were immersed in it, and it was completely, you know, in the moment. We were there, you know, there were no distractions, and it was a brilliant time. I don't think there's ever been a band like the Jam. They were really special.
Hey, look, final question for this podcast. So the purpose of this podcast is to meet amazing talents like yourself, dig into these Weller connections and hear their stories. But it's really for me to get the interview with Paul Weller that I never managed during my radio career. It's a bit of a daft thing to create a podcast of over 100 episodes just to get to the end point. But that's the goal. Well, we've got to make this happen. And if it happens and I get to chat to Paul, what should I ask him?
Right, okay. What keeps you going? Where does that come from? Where's that fountain springing from? What's that childish initial inspiration that's still flowing through your veins. What is that magic? Where does it come from? I don't know the answer to that myself, and I don't know if I've asked him that question. Maybe I should. I'm sure if you ask it, you'll get a better answer anyway. But that's what I would want to know, because he's got so much enthusiasm. He's still interested in what's going on now. He doesn't really want to look back, although he loves old records like we all do. He doesn't want to look back, And I often think to myself, if I'm writing with a new artist, I think, how would Paul feel about that? I don't mean in quality control. I just mean that how would he take that? How would that inspire him? So I do sort of think of him. You're right, Fred. That's my dog.
I need a walk.
Yeah. I often wonder, like how he would take that, and that kind of inspires me a little bit. I think a lot of writers do that. They like to zone in on their heroes a bit, like think, how would McCartney take that phrase or something, or that artist? What would they do if they met young James Bay, and how would they? What would they give to him? Sort of thing. I just wonder what keeps Weller as enthusiastic as he's been all these years, and he's still the same today. And I know if I sent him a song now, it would be like, he might say, I don't really like that one, but if he liked it, he'd have 10 suggestions about it. And you should try this, do this. Well, what about trying it as well? What keeps him that young, really? It feels like he's still 19, It's incredible, really, how he keeps that going.
What a great answer. Hey, look, man, this has been so special. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to hearing what's next, whether it's you writing for others or whatever's coming out of your own material. Fingers crossed on all that as well. And obviously the Questions re-release, special edition and all that kind of stuff too.
All the best. And say hi to all the Questions fans, and thank you for their comments and questions. That's lovely.
My thanks once again to Paul Barry. What an incredible journey and what a talent. Please do check out the show notes for this podcast on my website, Paul Weller Fan Podcast, for more details. Now, whilst you're there, you can also show your support by heading to my store. We've got exclusive merchandise, including right now our very first official podcast mug. And if you like, you can buy a virtual coffee to fill it with too. Don't forget, if you do that, you get yourself a shout out too. So on the roll call this week, Alan Ivory says, "Hi, Dan. I have recently started listening to your fantastic podcast. It really makes me smile. Just fans talking about someone that we like. A simple idea, but nailed perfectly." Well, thank you, Alan. Hi to Travis Blake, says, "Cheers for the fascinating, informative and entertaining podcast, Dan. Absolutely loving it, man. All the best, Travis." Thanks, Travis. Much appreciated. Hi to Jeremy from Sydney. Says, "Well done, Dan. Thank you and greetings down under." Jason Pevavar, "Excellent podcast, Dan. Every week is another treat. Keep up the good work. Thank you." Richard Noble, hi to you, says, "Keep up the excellent work, Dan, following your journey from Melbourne, Australia in your quest to speak to the King." Hello to our other subscribers, Mike C., Richard Jones-Nerzik, Simon Cartilage, Martin Glover, Steve Perry, Vince Biccarino, Alex McLaughlin, Peter Cook, Martin Alaric, Terry Vine, Andy Tolcher, Brian G., Mike Steer, Kevin Smith, Andy Liddell, Jen, Howard, Brian. Hi to all of you. Modcliffe says, "Great work, Dan. My car journeys are better now." Thank you for that, smiley face. Cheers to all of you. And don't forget, you can also leave a review wherever you get your podcasts as well. Just a couple of examples. This one from Lazy Poop says, "Paul Weller Fan Podcast. Fantastic episode with Billy Bragg. Great to hear the passion and belief from him that remains as strong as ever and the core values shared with Paul." Thank you. Don't forget, leave a podcast review wherever you get yours. Subscribe and follow as well. If you want to get in touch, you can do so on social media at Weller Fan Pod on Twitter or on Instagram and Facebook, Paul Weller Fan Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.